Up next in the broadcast, Seoul and Pyongyang agree on a date for the grand reopening of their joint business park. Starting next Monday, the Koreas will end the 5-month-long suspension with a trial run. On-year job creation here in the nation recorded its largest jump in nearly a year. The employment rate is now 64.6%, which is still far, though, from the president's goal of 70%. U.S. President Barack Obama asked the public to support his decision for a limited military strike on Syria, despite Russia's alternative plan to dismantle the regime's chemical weapons. Primetime News begins now.
Good evening and welcome to Primetime News. It's Wednesday, September 11th here in Korea. Live from Seoul, I am Yoo Ji-hye.
And I'm Sean Lim. Thank you so much for joining us. Well, the date has finally been set. Seoul and Pyongyang have agreed to resume operations at the Inter-Korean Kaesong Industrial Complex starting next Monday.
This comes nearly 5 months after they were unilaterally suspended by the North. A Unification Ministry correspondent Hwang Sung-hee has our top story.
South Korean factories at the Inter-Korean Kaesong Industrial Complex will be running again starting next week, ending a 5-month suspension of operations. The decision to reopen the complex was just one of the agreements reached at the second round of talks between the Joint Committee on the complex after marathon negotiations that stretched into early Wednesday morning.
Operations will resume starting September 16th on a trial basis. And so I can tell you that South Korean businessmen have overcome a very big hurdle towards the normalization of the complex.
The jointly run factory zone, a rare symbol of cooperation between the Koreas, has been shuttered since early April after the North unilaterally withdrew all of its workers amid heightened inter-Korean tensions. Under Wednesday's agreement, North Korea will provide compensation to the South Korean companies affected by the closure in the form of a tax waiver for this year. The two Koreas will also set up a secretariat for the complex this month. In addition, they will invite foreign investors to the border town in October to explain business opportunities there.
Some of the benefits for foreign companies that want to enter the South Korean market will be the business park's close vicinity to the target market and cheap labor.
The Koreas also agreed to work towards allowing the use of mobile phones and the internet in the business park within the year, as well as easing South Koreans' commute to the complex through the use of electronic identification devices. Another round of subcommittee meetings will be convened on Friday, followed by a third round of talks by the Joint Committee on Monday. Seoul's Unification Ministry says that the two Koreas made meaningful progress towards the normalization of the Kaesong Industrial Complex, but some experts doubt the effectiveness of the latest agreements, pointing out that the North is notorious for not keeping its promises. Hwang Sung-hee, Arirang News.
President Park Geun-hye returned home Wednesday afternoon after wrapping up a two-nation trip which took her to Russia and Vietnam.
From her debut on the international stage at the G20 summit in Russia to her so-called sales diplomacy in Vietnam, our Kim Yeon-ji wraps up the president's overseas trips.
President Park Geun-hye made her debut on the stage of multilateral diplomacy at the G20 summit in St. Petersburg, Russia, last week. Experts have given the president high marks for her leadership at the G20 summit in her role as a facilitator between developed and emerging nations. She called on developed nations to be careful when bringing their stimulus measures to an end, considering the negative impact the action could have on emerging markets. In her keynote speech at the G20, President Park suggested new approaches for tackling the global economic downturn. Her ideas include managing a disciplined market economy and her vision for what she calls a creative economy, which involves creating new jobs through the creative fusion of technology with other industries. On the sidelines of the G20, President Park met with the leaders of Italy, Germany, Kazakhstan, and Russia. She also made contact with U.S. President Barack Obama and Chinese leader Xi Jinping. After the G20, President Park flew to Vietnam, where she launched a diplomatic drive to promote Korea's economic interests in the Southeast Asian country. Her sales diplomacy, as it is known in Korea, appears to have had a positive effect. On Monday, President Park and Vietnamese President Truong Tan Sang agreed to conclude a comprehensive bilateral trade agreement next year. The two leaders pledged to triple the trade volume between the two nations to $70 billion by 2020. In particular, President Park boosted the prospects for Korean firms seeking nuclear power plant contracts in Vietnam, which aims to build 10 nuclear reactors by 2030. Vietnam also pledged to support Korean companies interested in participating in various energy and infrastructure projects. For its part, Korea promised Vietnam a series of development aid projects. In particular, Korea will set up a Science Technology Research Institute in Vietnam, modeled after the Korea Institute of Science and Technology. Kim Hyun-ji, Arirang News.
In line with the government's efforts to boost employment, Korea's job creation is picking up speed.
The latest number shows the country's employment grew the most in 11 months. Hwang Ji-hye has more on the welcome news from Korea's labor front.
Hopes are growing that labor market conditions in Korea are picking up as the number of new jobs accelerated last month. Statistics Korea said Wednesday that the number of employed people stood at around 25 million in August, up more than 400,000 from the same period a year earlier. On-year job creation for August posted its largest jump in 11 months. The employment rate of those aged between 15 and 64 rose 0.3 percentage points to 64.6% in August, a healthy number but still well under the Park Geun-hye administration's target of 70%. The agency said the rise in the number of salaried workers and the number of self-employed declining at a slower pace helped boost job creation to over 400,000. By age, however, the number of employed people in their 20s dropped by 36,000, with the employment rate of that age bracket falling more than 1 percentage point to 56.6%. The number of employed people in their 30s also dropped by 23,000. It's no surprise then that while the nation's jobless rate held steady at 3% last month from the previous year, the rate for those aged between 25 to 29 rose 1.2 percentage points to nearly 7%. By sector, the Health and Social Welfare Service added the most jobs at over 175,000 in August from a year earlier. The hospitality and dining business also added 96,000 more jobs. The data comes as the nation's economy is showing signs of recovery from its prolonged downturn. The Korean economy grew 1.1% in the second quarter of this year from the previous quarter, rising above 1% for the first time in more than 2 years. Hwang Ji-hye, Arirang News.
Before your day ends and another begins, get the latest news live from Seoul.
Residents whose features restrictions is on the rise. Closing ceremony.
Expert analysis from Asia's heartbeat.
The legislature, circumstances.
With a viewpoint only Korea's global network can provide.
The United States, the latest report. Less than
Unrivaled access from a team always on standby.
Meaning came on to maneuver, trying to cover up the South's true intentions. U.S. President Barack Obama has given one of the most important speeches of his presidency. He tried to convince a skeptical nation that military action against Syria is required. He said that he welcomed Moscow's move for a diplomatic path on Syria, but said the military option is still on the table. Our Kim Ji-yeon reports.
President Obama made a televised address late Tuesday evening local time to explain his decision to respond to Syria's alleged use of chemical weapons with targeted airstrikes. Obama said his administration knows the Bashar al-Assad regime was responsible for the chemical weapons attack and described it as a clear crime against humanity.
When dictators commit atrocities, they depend upon the world to look the other way until those horrifying pictures fade from memory. But these things happened. The facts cannot be denied.
Obama added that a failure to act would threaten the security of the U.S. and its allies, and added that the question now is what the U.S. and the international community is prepared to do about the violations.
If we fail to act, the Assad regime will see no reason to stop using chemical weapons. As the ban against these weapons erodes, other tyrants will have no reason to think twice about acquiring poison gas and using them.
Obama also explained why the military response would be limited and would not result in another war in the region. He reiterated that surgical strikes on Syria would send a clear message to deter the Assad regime from using chemical weapons again.
Let me make something clear. The United States military doesn't do pinpricks. Even a limited strike will send a message to Assad that no other nation can deliver. But a targeted strike can make Assad, or any other dictator, think twice before using chemical weapons.
Obama welcomed the Russian initiative as an alternative to military action and added that he asked congressional leaders to postpone a vote to authorize the use of force for the diplomatic path. However, the president did say the military option is on the ready if the deal fails, adding that the Assad regime needs to verify that it will keep its commitments. Kim Ji-yeon, Arirang News.
The city of Seoul has officially launched a new bus service that will operate in the wee hours from midnight to 5 a.m. every day. While most are in favor of the so-called owl buses, there are some who are not. Connie Lee has more on the new late-night transportation system.
It's a little past midnight, and the first night bus of the day is off. This N37 will be making more than a dozen stops before it ends its route at 5 a.m. Branded as the Owl Bus, these night buses shine its owl logo on the front and side to signal their nighttime duty. The city of Seoul is currently running 2 night bus routes in a trial run, but come Friday, 7 more routes will be added to the list, making it 9 routes in total. The trial run of the first 2 routes was a success, with more than 2,000 passengers using the bus each day. It's past 2 a.m. here in Seoul, but as you can see behind me, this night bus is full of passengers.
I'm using the night bus for the first time today after hanging out with friends. I think it's great and convenient. The bus stops near my house and it's also cheaper than taking a taxi.
It costs 1,851, or about $1.70, much cheaper than taking a taxi, which has a starting rate of about $2.60 after midnight. In a survey, the government found that 88% of Seoul residents are in favor of having more of these buses, but there are also those who are not so pleased.
For taxi drivers like us that get a lot of business in the late hours, these new buses are really going to affect our business.
Government officials, however, disagree.
The people who use the night buses are different from those who take taxis. Passengers who don't mind the waiting time will take the night buses, but those who want to get to their destinations quickly will take taxis. So we don't think taxi drivers will be that affected.
The wait for each bus could in fact be pretty long, 40 to 45 minutes on average. And as safety is a concern, especially late at night, Owl bus drivers can only drive under the speed limit of 70 kilometers an hour, and they cannot have worked during the day. Connie Lee, Arirang News.
Korean films have continued to pull in record ticket sales in recent years, and last month that number reached an all-time high.
All thanks to stronger plot lines and bigger budgets than ever before. Our cultural correspondent Park Ji-won has more on the Korean film boom in the country.
From the global sensation Snowpiercer by award-winning director Bong Joon-ho to the action thriller The Terror Life and the mystery thriller Hide and Seek, Korean films continue to pull viewers into theaters. And just last month, ticket sales for Korean films hit an all-time high with more than 21 million admissions. Ticket sales for all films increased by 20% last month compared to the same month the year before, going from some 24 million to over 29 million. But it was Korean films that drove the increase. Ticket sales for Korean films were at 17 million in August 2012, but by the same month this year, the figure had gone up to more than 21 million, an increase of nearly 30% in just a year. That's more than 75% of all tickets sold in Korea in August. During the same period, foreign films saw a decrease of 0.7%, going from 7.2 million tickets last year to 7.1 million this year. Director Bong Joon-ho's English language debut Snowpiercer has been at the forefront of the recent box office boom, garnering ticket sales of over 9 million since it opened at the end of July. The mystery thriller Hide and Seek and the action thriller The Terror Life have sold over 5.5 million tickets each, both in less than a month or two after their release.
Viewers seem to be more attracted to the recent spat of Korean films. These recent box office hits show that Korean films can deal with a variety of subjects and genres, instead of covering the same old subjects. And that's one of the main reasons for the box office successes.
Kim Young-gi, a researcher for the Korean Film Council, also said the public's interest in cultural events and products has increased over the past few years, and that has also contributed to the increased number of moviegoers in the nation. Park Ji-won, Arirang News.
To tell us more about the continued upward trend in the Korean film industry, we have film critic Piers Conran, an editor at Modern Korean Cinema, and a correspondent for Twitch Film here with us today. Good to have you with us.
Thanks for having me again. Great to be back.
Well, as our G1 just reported, Korean films, the Korean box office broke some records over August. What made Korean films so popular this summer as opposed to previous years?
Well, I think it's been going up for the last few years, and August is a particularly strong month generally for Korean cinema. I mean, the weather is at its peak. People want to go into an air-conditioned theater. Schools are out, so people are on holidays, and also because the first few months of summer, let's say from May until July, are kind of dominated by Hollywood films. That's their traditional blockbuster period. But that tapers off at late July, so suddenly the doors open for Korean films. So August has been generally the time when like these big blockbusters are programmed. But it has been going up the last few years. The market is expanding.
We have seen an influx of good Korean movies. What explains that, and how come they are beating its Hollywood rivals in recent years?
Well, I think like in August, they didn't really have many rivals. I mean, there's all these huge Korean films in August. There was basically no competition, but that was deliberate as well. You know, they're like, for instance, the film Elysium might have been released in early August, the way it was around the world. But I think they realized, well, with Snowpiercer there, it's a little similar. Let's try our chance a little later in a more open period.
Well, unlike in the past, these smaller distributors now are gaining a bigger foothold in Korean film. For example, the distributor New has spawned many box office hits like Miracle and Cell No. 7 and New World. How have they been able to muscle in among these bigger players?
Well, I mean, they've been, they're very clever at what they're doing. They're making these very commercial films on one side, and they're not as expensive as these big movies from CJ and Lotte. They're not costing $10 million. They're costing a fraction of that. And we're seeing it's just these clever genre films, but also they have this amazing international presence. For instance, right now there's a Toronto International Film Festival is happening. There are 4 Korean films there. All of those films are new films. They're NEW films. So they are this major new player. I mean, this year they are the biggest studio by far. They've had just hit after hit, and a lot of them have just kind of come out of nowhere. Miracle and Cell No. 7, unbelievably successful. Same recently with Hide and Seek. You know, small movies with not so many big stars, but still commercial, and just, you know, they know what the public wants, I guess, and it's been working well for them. I anticipate that they'll do well in the years to come.
We hear that you're a huge fan of director Bong Joon-ho. Are there any other up-and-coming films or filmmakers that we should keep our eyes on?
I certainly am a huge fan of Bong Joon-ho. Looking at these, there's always a number of great Korean filmmakers that are kind of coming up in the industry. They don't all get the chance they deserve, but there's certainly a few out there. Right now, I would say I'm a big fan of an animation director called Yeon Sang-ho. He made a film called The King of Pigs, which came out 2 years ago in Busan, and has been doing this long trip around the world at festivals, been doing very well. His new film just premiered at Toronto. It's called The Fake, and it will screen first in Korea next month at the Busan Film Festival. I also really like a filmmaker called Shin Soo-won, who made a film called Pluto, which came out in July here on limited release. It was also from Busan last year. And maybe my favorite is a guy called Jang Kon-jae, who made a film called Sleepless Night, which premiered at Jeonju last year. A wonderful, wonderful little indie. And when I say little, I mean it. It's only 63 minutes long.
Wow. Well, what do Korean films need to keep the momentum going?
Well, I think there's always, right now all of Asia is experiencing massive growth, but these things do go in cycles. So I think people need to be careful and just not just kind of go, okay, this is working now, and 6-month plans aren't going to do it. You need like 5-year plans. Make sure that the industry stays healthy. I mean, because it will happen that there will be periods when things aren't so good. I would like to see the studios get a little more control back into the hands of the filmmakers. Also I'd like to see independent films given more screening times, and because there's this problem where we have the big studios generally own their own theaters, and that's something that was abolished in Hollywood, decades ago. It gives an unfair advantage to the studio films.
All right, Pierce, thank you very much for joining us today.
It's been my pleasure. Thanks, guys.
Pro golfer Park In-bi is headed to France seeking to add a 4th major victory to her already spectacular season.
And we have Stephen Che in the Sports Center to give us a rundown of her quest for the Grand Slam. Hello there.
Hey guys, as Park readies to defend her title at the Evian Championship starting on Thursday, talks of the highly elusive Grand Slam have reemerged. They heated up after she won the U.S. Women's Open in late June, but fizzled after she finished the Women's British Open last month at 42nd. The issue is that even if she wins at Evian, whether the accomplishment can be called a Grand Slam in a single season is up for debate. But before anything, however, she'll have to win. The defending Evian champion tees off at 3:18 in the morning local time, which is 3:18 in the afternoon in Korea. Moving on to Olympics news, in a historic first, an Olympic champion, Thomas Bach, has been elected as president of the International Olympic Committee. Bach, a gold medal winning fencer for Germany, will become the 9th president at the IOC, taking over the reins of the most influential position in world sports from Jacques Roguet, who leaves after 12 years on the job. The 59-year-old has pledged to reform the structure of the Olympics, as well as review the process of bidding and staging the Games. And rounding the bases, it's time for Wednesday's top KBO matchup. The Samsung Lions took on the Nexen Heroes at Mokdong. The Lions trying to rebound, the Heroes trying to taste 3rd place. Top first, it's the Lions' Chae Young-woo. 2-run shot to right. It's 2-0 Lions. Now we go on to the 3rd. It's coming out right now. Nexen's Lee Tae-kun hits into the double play, but a runner scores. 2-1, Lions still up. It's Samsung again in the 4th. Kim Tae-won hits a solo homer. 3-1 Lions. Next inning, an outfielder error brings another Lion home, and they go on to win this one with a final score of 7-1. And looking at the scores from around the league, Lotte defeats NC 2-0. Kia defeats SK 2-1 in walk-off fashion, and Tucson and LG had their game canceled. That does it for me here in the Sports Center. This has been Stephen Che. Check back at midnight for the latest in the world of sports.
Now let's go over to our Kim Bo-kyung at the Weather Center. Bo-kyung, we got more rain here in Seoul on Wednesday. Any relief in sight?
Well, Sean, as of now, rain is in the forecast until the weekend.
Meaning more precipitation tomorrow?
Well, those of you in the inland region should wake up to a foggy morning. But before we move on to tomorrow's forecast, let's take a look at the satellite map. We are currently at the edge of a high pressure front from China, which is why we're seeing cloudy skies generally throughout the nation. Tomorrow, we should once again have heavy clouds covering the skies. But don't put away your umbrellas just yet, because the showers should resume starting in the central regions later at night. Now, taking a closer look at the forecast, in Seoul, rain is in the forecast later in the afternoon, reaching a daytime high of 27 degrees. And it looks like the southern regions are going to have a cloudy day, getting up to the high 20s. Moving on to other regions, Daejeon should have similar weather conditions as Seoul, hitting 27 degrees. Meanwhile, Dokdo and Kumgang top out at 24 and 17 degrees, respectively. Well, that's all I have for you this hour, but join me for another update after midnight.
And that's our broadcast on this Wednesday night. I'm Yoo Ji-hye in Seoul.
And I'm Sean Lim. Thanks for joining us. Have a great evening. We'll see you soon.